So do pop your questions in the Q&A. And we've just got one comment so far about energizing anxiety, which I think is really helpful, and talking about how good X are at that kind of thing. And I hope we can come back to XR, because I think it's a really important group to talk about. But I wondered if I could kind of pick up on a point from earlier in the day, actually about language. And the importance of words, because there are sort of many people, as you say, Anouchka. Most recently I read a paper by Gareth Barnwell about how kind of climate anxiety doesn't really speak to the myriad of social and environmental justice issues that shape the psychological distress in the global south. It doesn't really capture the power imbalances. It doesn't capture the experiences of, for example, like the Greenlandic population or the Inuit populations who are actually witnessing destruction before their very eyes, and you know, how central the land is to their identities. So I just wonder, and I'd be interested in your perspectives as well, Shuo, about kind of, you know, is anxiety the right term? Do we need to, I don't know, push back against it? Or, you know, are there better ways of kind of articulating this if we're trying to communicate it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly the idea that anxiety presupposes something that might not happen makes it, I suppose it's just the wrong term. But the fact that it's caught on is maybe we just have to work with it. Like maybe turning it around is not going to happen. But yeah, but it seems to keep a kind of critical perspective on it is important.
I guess I was just thinking about, the way that we describe our relationship with nature, and I guess maybe there is a lack in terms of the West, in terms of thinking about, I guess, things being cyclical, things being seasonal, and I guess being the amount of time that we spend in nature and the world, and I guess I would agree that I guess anxiety, I guess it's a clinical word that we use as well, so that makes it a bit more problematic. But I guess I'm also struggling to think about ways of describing, you know, like a love for nature in the language that we have, that we use more day to day. I guess there might be kind of Greek origins, composites, etc. But I think in I guess in other cultures, they might have a slightly different way of thinking about these sorts of relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, the kind of labeling of eco-anxiety is a very sort of white Western way of thinking about it. So actually probably the communities that are experiencing the grief and what they're witnessing now may well have their own words and a better place to tell us how they're feeling. And I guess that's why kind of the studies like the Greenlandic one and kind of qualitative research and co-participatory research is so important in actually hearing from people themselves. There's a question from Norman Poole, our bulletin editor, which I think is a really good one. So should we be asking our patients about climate anxiety, or should we wait for them to bring it up?
That's such a good provocative question, because I suppose, yeah, you're not meant to be making your people feel worse about things that had never even crossed their minds. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I get, well, certainly in the psychoanalytic world or psychodynamic, you wouldn't probably be introducing ideas that people haven't introduced themselves. But I certainly have a bookshelf full of books, you know, in the background of my office, all the kind of eco-psychoanalysis books and whatever on the bookshelf. So it's not really a secret that I suppose, I think it's a thing, and the chair that people sit on in my office faces my bookshelf. So I don't know, but I definitely wouldn't. I've heard of therapists sometimes kind of, I don't know, getting cross, and they've been hearing about someone maybe who takes loads and loads of flights, and they've just had a little bit of an outburst and said, do you think that's okay? I guess that's not clinically recommended. But.
I guess I'm just thinking about clinically, what would I do day to day? I guess if I were asking about anxiety in general, I guess certain themes might come up, and I guess a theme that might come up might be, I guess, this feeling of kind of being on edge and being not able to control things and kind of feeling kind of powerless. And I guess we do in general kind of ask, do you worry that your house is going to burn down if you leave the switch on, and those sorts of questions. I guess I don't ask about anxiety about the climate day to day, but I think if someone were to bring it up, I would kind of ask about that a bit more. I guess I don't. I think it's difficult. I guess if someone doesn't bring it into a consultation, I guess as a medical professional, I guess it's a similar thing maybe towards kind of asking about religion. Like you wouldn't maybe necessarily ask about someone's religion or politics in a medical consultation, but if someone brings it up and it is part of their presentation, then you might explore it a bit more with them.
Yeah, because I think people never come saying that they've got climate anxiety or eco-anxiety. I've never heard of that at all. People come with whatever they come with, and then that will be a part of it. And so I've heard sometimes psychotherapists in conferences or whatever say, but I've never seen a case of eco-anxiety. Why are you saying it's a thing? But you think, but surely there are people turning up to your clinic saying they have no sense of future, or that people don't use the terminology. But I think they're talking about it all the time. It's almost unusual for people not to be registering that somewhere in their discourse, however they name it.
I think it's absolutely true. People don't come with a label, and it's, well, sometimes we end up labeling them inappropriately, but it's also our job to try and tease out what's what. But I think it's also about signaling that you're a safe person to talk to about these things, and you're not going to dismiss or gaslight that person or their anxieties. And I guess it's a similar thing to sort of signaling safety and how you respond to that first kind of disclosure in whatever way of what someone's really, really worried about and what they're really here to talk about. But although interestingly, there is a question about how much of ourselves we bring into the consulting room. I'm thinking of a trainee who I spoke to recently who has had conversations that have started because he had an XR sticker on a mug in the room, and that was the beginning of a conversation with a patient. So I guess there's different ways, but that maybe it is okay to bring something of ourselves as well that might signal, whether it's books in the background or a mug or a lanyard or something like that. So it's really, really interesting thing to think about. So we've got some questions coming through into the chat. I'm just trying to scroll because there's a lot of discussion now. So there's a question from Nina Bentley about kind of how do we talk to people who have neither anxiety, grief, or stress, those people who have healthy concern?
How do you...
I suppose they may not be coming to see us is one thing, but they might be, I don't know, perhaps reading things that you're writing or hearing. I guess it kind of chimes into a question I was going to ask is kind of actually about how we communicate, knowing what can happen when knowing the emotional responses that can be triggered by talking about climate change and breakdown. How do we kind of pitch things at that right level that doesn't send people kind of spiraling into despair, but also doesn't miss the point or minimize it? So maybe a question about kind of communicating.
Yeah, that seems to be a really amazing area of research at the moment, because I think there was that study of people being shown the film The Day After Tomorrow, which is about a huge kind of ecological collapse. And that apparently people interviewed the day after seeing that film often felt less afraid because it was so overwhelming, that kind of possibility that they'd managed to, push it back. And yeah, that alarming people can be really counterproductive. And so when you speak to people, I don't know, who work in charities like plastics, trying to get plastics out of the sea or whatever. That is their big problem. It's like, how do you present people with the horror of this thing? And the idea that there's this sort of perfect point in the middle between sort of absolute alarm and complacency. It's like nobody knows where that point is, and so we're all trying to find it and feel it and see who we're talking to and whatever. But it's really, really difficult.
I feel like the point has changed as well, and I guess in a good way, because I feel like 5 years ago even we wouldn't be having a conversation in a similar way using similar language. I guess that the college declared the climate an ecological emergency, and we didn't. I guess a few years ago we probably wouldn't have thought that would be possible in the way that it was, and I guess we're now in a way, we're talking about the emergency in a quite calm way. So I guess we're kind of doing some of that kind of, I guess, mediating and highlighting that it is a problem, but we kind of, in order to get to a solution, we kind of need to keep our thinking hats on and to work together towards the things.
There's a great paper from the 1970s, I think it's a psychiatrist called Harold Searles, who starts with this thing that it's really, really problematic for psychiatrists, because if thinking that the end of the world is imminent is, classically a marker of psychosis, then it just meant that people working in that field were really, really nervous about going anywhere near it. And that was, so in the 70s, it was the beginning of, real panic about pesticides and all that stuff. And he was saying you wouldn't dare mention it in front of your colleagues because that would be the end of you.
Definitely, and I guess there is that fear and quite an understandable sort of mistrust of psychiatry to kind of pathologize real fears. So it is, and I think we're better perhaps than we used to, although that psychiatry has a very problematic history of pathologizing dissenters and people who were actually trying to speak out against something that's very, very wrong. So I think it's a really important time to be not doing that as well. I'm very pleased that that's the direction the college is going in, rather than kind of trying to make eco-anxiety into kind of a DSM criteria thing. So I think but that doesn't mean we can't have a role in supporting people who are distressed. So I think that's where both of you work differently, but in a similar way, I think. There's a question from Delith about why do you think that climate anxiety or grief is most commonly talked about in the context of young people? Is it because they're the ones with the least voice in decision making? And she always thinks that it's a cruel irony that the people who are most likely to feel the impacts of climate change most gravely are the ones who have the least power.
Just yes to everything, to all of it. Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's very upsetting. I mean, I suppose before, because I know that I'm this sort of okay boomer thing, when you see the older people in XR who just would throw themselves under any vehicle, stick themselves to anything, that there are counterpoints to that, I guess, that it's certainly true that younger people are going to bear the brunt, and also are really brilliant spokespeople for this stuff. Like I think Greta can pierce through layers of stuff that maybe older people can't, because it's just horrifying to think of, I don't know, sort of how she's thinking or what she's articulating. It's terrifying. But I suppose that there are some amazing older people in the movement who use their oldness to really, really do a lot, and that's very impressive.
Definitely, and I think there are older people now who have been campaigning forever, who were at Green, yes, who've been who have a lot to teach the younger generation as well, and vice versa. But I guess that's one of the things we've seen with XR as well. Some brilliant older people who are just like, well, this is what I can do now. There's a comment in the chat about kind of children from Juliet Brown about children sort of more in touch with this reality, but there are older people who are also feeling kind of shame and sadness at the legacy. And I guess when we think about the sort of developmental stages of getting older, is that it is about what legacy you leave, and that's not an easy position to be holding at the moment either. So there's a question from Nithanchi Delage about economic gain with environment protection is an important link in low and middle income countries. Ecotourism may be a solution to prevent deforestation, desertification and beach pollution. Do we have any thoughts about kind of ecotourism as a solution?
Well, it's very interesting. It's not a field that I'm super familiar with, and it would be interesting to see how it works. And I suppose everyone gets, what's the thing, when there's some kind of solution available, then you have to look at it in a very multifaceted way, and everyone's so anxious about greenwashing and making things look good when they're not good. So I suppose you'd have a lot of questions about the ecotourism, and you'd want to know that it was doing what it said it did. But yeah, it's certainly, I mean, all ideas are interesting if they're sort of trying to move in that direction of stopping damage.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just thinking about in South America in terms of, I guess, Costa Rica, it had a political, like a certain set of different circumstances that led it to basically investing in ecotourism, but they also invest a lot more in education as well, and they have a bit more of a stable government. So I think there's, I guess you would need to look at ecotourism in its kind of wider social political context, how it's being used and by whom and for what, and you know, where's the money coming from and where's it going, all of those considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some comments in the chat about kind of the pitfalls and sort of taking flights to get places, or, you know, things appearing to be green but not, which is a big problem in so many ways. And I guess it leads on to something I was going to ask you both about, because you know, a lot of your work show is thinking about the intersections and the intersecting inequalities, and sort of thinking about just transitions. And I wonder if either of you had any kind of thoughts on sort of where we head with this, and kind of any thoughts, perhaps even locally, about how we kind of transition in a way that actually does genuinely improve the health of people and doesn't abandon the same groups who've been abandoned.
Yeah, I guess I feel like at the moment, I think so clinically, my very real reality at the moment, post-COVID, you know, I guess we're kind of still in COVID, but post the main peak of COVID, and with the increase in service demands across all populations, but also for young people as well, I feel like we need to kind of develop a sequence of priorities that that might maybe address the acute demand first, and I think at the moment it feels like staffing and retaining staff in services, that's kind of psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers and you know, everyone, is a little bit of a slog, and I'm hoping that there will be more investment and more money and I guess more hope put in, and then gradually we could then think about prevention and thinking about joining up services within localities, so between mental health and primary care, secondary care, thinking about schools, the council, and really being able to make communities, I guess, health generating environments rather than environments that are stressful to live in without adequate resources, and where people are having to, I don't know, like work multiple jobs, not have adequate housing, etc. So I guess in a way that's at the moment, I guess a little bit the hierarchy for me in terms of thinking about things, but maybe it will change with changing times.
Yeah, I wondered about, in response to the question as well, about this, the whole thing of sort of giving things up, losing things and having things taken away seem to be sort of three categories where we're gonna, well, a lot of all three is gonna happen. And the thing of wealthy countries trying to either, well, take things away from less wealthy countries is really problematic. And so in the David Attenborough documentary, I know he's not perfect, but in his documentaries that were on the other day, there was this great bit showing about deforestation in Britain, and that we ran to Brazil for all the deforestation, but we live in a completely deforested country, and that it was done during the Industrial Revolution, and our sort of rolling green fields aren't natural at all. That we just deforested first, and now we think that's nature, and we're having a go at other people for doing what we've already done, and we did it so long ago we've kind of forgotten. And so sorting out all of that stuff is really, really difficult, because there is sort of resentment that's going to come from which countries telling people what to do is completely understandable. But also that it's not that we're particularly asking people to give things up in a nice way. Things are just being lost, things are not burning, things are melting, things are going. And so yeah, those sort of how to persuade people to give things up graciously seems so important, and especially people in wealthy countries. And that's proving very difficult, it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say about the kind of history of our own land, well, I'm Australian, so I say my own land,
yeah, me too,
the digital land,
yeah.
because Australia isn't mine at all.
Yes.
But think, there's a connection that we don't in the kind of Western world to the history of the land, and I guess there's something about storytelling as well, but also a distancing of ourselves from nature, but also a distancing of where our products come from, and how our country has a hand in a lot of the things that we look on as bad in other countries are actually being funded by our own country. And so there is something about kind of, forming the connections and people actually being educated. But also there's an illusion of choice, isn't there, in terms of, you could choose a greener option, but for many people, poverty or a particular situation means that they're not in a position to choose. And actually capitalism puts us in a position where we think we have choice, but actually we're only being offered the choices that we can see. So there's a lot to unpick, but there's I wonder, thinking then about COP26, because I definitely want to kind of think about, well, yeah, do I want to think about it? I'm not sure. But I'm mindful, Shuo, that you've been to a number of kind of climate talks in the past, and that I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're part of the RC Psych delegation. And I just wonder, from you, but also from Anouchka, you probably have hopes as well, but what are your kind of hopes for COP26? And what do you think hasn't worked in the past? What do you hope might come of this?
So the college are really excited to send a delegation to COP. We've got 5 places, and exactly how that's going to work out is still being agreed, because we've, I guess the communication between COP and the college and other organisations, etc., as people might have heard from the media, hasn't been so smooth. And I guess I should also say that in the past I've been part of the supporting team for COP delegations as part of the UK YCC, the Youth and Climate Coalition. But my friends physically were there, and I was kind of there more virtually to support them. And I guess that's kind of links back to an earlier question about, I guess, young people. So I guess the earlier COPs that I remember being very significant in my life, and that I was, I guess, more of an active participant in when I was in my late teens. And I guess I remember feeling very, very disappointed and disheartened following Copenhagen and following Durban, etc. And it felt like we were one of the wins that we were celebrating was changing, getting some words added into a document, and it felt like very we don't know what this means. Would this actually result in in changes on the ground, also aware that maybe it's not going to be adopted by all the politicians, and what are the drivers for enforcing and auditing and implementation of all of these things. So which I think is why I've ended up maybe thinking about things on a more local level of like, what can I do day to day, what can the NHS do, etc. But with COP being in Glasgow, and with everything that's been happening in terms of the climate events and with the increasing evidence, I do feel more hopeful about this COP than I guess the COPs in between my disappointment and until now. And I am, so I'm hoping that there is enough enthusiasm in terms of civic society and in terms of global institutions that we will get good commitments and a good way of ensuring that these commitments are adhered to. And I guess we'll have to wait and see. So I guess we'll do our best in terms of, I guess, advocating that this is, I think we're at a tipping point in terms of any action, and that it's not just going to affect the economy, it's going to affect people's lives and people's kind of mental health. And hopefully that message will cut through.
Mm. I hope, as well. But it's, I mean, I know there's a lot of, gloominess about COP among environmentalists, because it looks like potentially just a big greenwashing exercise, and that is the risk of those things. And I suppose there's been so much stuff this week, like there was at the Science Museum, a new exhibition opened that was funded by Adani, who's a big fossil fuel guy, and it's all about sort of green energy of the future, and he's literally like a mega polluter. And this week he's been having nice chats with Boris Johnson about the climate and stuff. And it does seem that we've got this government who tell us not to do naughty things because we've just got to go through the proper processes. But at the same time, someone from within the government, their climate advisor, is saying we have to act within, 3 or 4 years. And so if we're only allowed to vote every 4 years, how are we going to bring about the sort of urgent changes we need if we've got a prime minister who's talking to Adani, who thinks that pretending to be a proponent of green energy is okay? I don't really see how. It just seems that people need to be pressing people at COP very, very hard if they're going to do anything, because the risk is that it's just a big greenwashing operation that's going to sort of ostensibly calm everyone down and make us all shut up because it looks like something's being done, but it just isn't. It isn't being done at anything like the speed that's needed. And there's this term predatory hesitation, which people use to talk about how businesses just delay a bit, just keep going with the things they're doing. They're going to change, but and they can profit a lot with that little pause. And it seems, there's so much of that stuff going on that it's just very alarming. So I really want to think that COP can change something, but it looks like the ways people pretend to bring about change are really, really the sort of most frightening thing that we need to be trying to dismantle at the moment.
I think that leads on to the question that I did want to ask, because I've seen, Anouchka, you interviewed with XR and talking about their activities. And I guess I wonder, given the slowness of action and, the kind of normal channels or the science isn't being listened to, what is the role of kind of non-violent civil disobedience and kind of activism?
I don't know, because I can get upset with XR. I totally, I saw why people were critical of XR about all sorts of things, but sort of who else is doing something. And I think the thing that's really tragic with XR is that they, they're brilliant and they think things through, they really try, but they get represented in this most troubling way. And so with the last round of protests on the ground, they were brilliant. Like, it was lovely to be with those people, and there was an acknowledgement that something was real. People on buses passing the protests were waving and clapping. People in the street were really like, yay. And then you would read, even in the bloody Guardian, you would read like, oh, XR were rubbish again today. It was really bad. Oh gosh, they've lost the plot. And how are they supposed to get anything done if that's how they're being represented? And it just doesn't seem to match what you see when you're there. So yeah, I feel really, really sorry for XR, and I think they're amazing that they keep trying. And I think their urgency, sometimes they break through and they do get things done once in a while, but I think the way this sort of turning against them and saying, oh, you're so counterproductive with your annoying protests that stop us, using public transport or whatever, it's not fair.
And there is something of sort of the scapegoating of activists, isn't there, in terms of painting them as there's an article from Boris Johnson recently about hairy jacketed people, and because XR are bringing the news that this is serious, so there's a lot of kind of positioning that can be used to kind of silence, but I think one of the interesting areas is also about kind of the role of, because people are asking about what they can do, and we'll hopefully, when Shuo comes back, because I think she's been called away, to think about what psychiatrists can do. But I guess, is there something important about health professionals also perhaps getting involved in these activities, because is that a sort of tipping point where a respected profession is willing to put themselves to be arrested? Does that send a stronger message?
I think it's terrible, but it does. Like the doctors die-in at the last round of protests in August, I think, that was amazing. Like, that was almost the only thing that was well presented in the news. People were like, oh my goodness, it must be serious if those people are doing it. And it can be annoying. Like, people like my parents will say, oh, it's not just beardy weirdies anymore. Now the doctors are saying it. So, the politicians are going to listen and they're going to act now, and it's good. And but I think it is really important that doctors and psychiatrists speak up, and that if you are in those positions, it makes such a difference.
And I think one of the important messages as well is that it's not, there are lots of different ways for people to be involved. So we're not, the message from today is not that everyone should go out and get arrested, but that there are many, many different roles that we can all play. Because I think there's a question from Norman Poole again, hitting the nail on the head, but he's kind of asking, kind of, when he goes into work next Monday, what is the one thing he should do as a psychiatrist to help the climate? Brackets, I already cycle to work. So are there any suggestions? I could, of course, point him to the 10-point suggestions from the college as well, but you both may have some thoughts as well for Norman.
But Norman has already brilliantly done an amazing journal, so he's in credit. But I suppose maybe the thing to say to that, because that's a question that often comes up, and basically that there isn't one thing, and so and the idea that there is one thing can sometimes be really unhelpful to people, because maybe if they're doing one thing and it's not the right thing, or that I don't know, or that if there was one thing you could do that and then you could not do the other thing. So, but the fact that it's kind of a big mess, and if you're doing what you can, then that's the best thing. If cycling to work and doing a brilliant journal is what Norman does, that's cool.
I think it's important to actually think about things that are like personally rewarding as well, so that it makes it a bit more sustainable. So I assume that Norman probably finds cycling personally rewarding, so he's carrying on doing it. And I guess at work, there's just so many things. So, but I guess maybe sometimes people are put off because there's so many things. And I guess something that I know that estates people always talk to me about is clinical waste. It's not very sexy, but I think it costs, for an institution, it it would save them a lot of money, and I guess it means that we're not burning things unnecessarily, and if we, so even just putting it into the right place and reducing the amount of clinical waste that we're literally burning, that would be really helpful. And then maybe to then think about recycling. So it's like those sorts of little things, but that's not an example of something that is rewarding at all. But I guess that's a win in terms of like an institution that you might like to think about. But then there's other sort of ideas maybe about getting your colleagues to maybe think about their work or their role in a slightly different way, and something, and an intervention related to that might be maybe suggesting that you go out for a walk with your colleagues or patients as part of a group in nature. Hopefully that will be quite rewarding, and you might have use that opportunity to have a little bit of a chat and a reflection about what other things you could do together at work.
Yeah, exactly, because it seems there's sort of risk, isn't there, sometimes, of just getting lost in all the possibilities, and especially that thing like, oh, don't bother with the small stuff, it's only the big stuff that's going to make a difference. And then you think, well, I can't do the big stuff, so what's the point in the small stuff, or all that, you know. But basically whatever you do is good, like whatever's possible in your life that's good, it's worth doing, just keep doing it.
I think it reminds me of a tweet I saw about diversification of hope, in that you kind of put parcels of hope in different areas. So some is in campaigning and pressuring governments, and some is in kind of local activities and cohesion. Some needs to be regenerative for yourself. And I guess days like today also a kind of a sort of act of hope as well. I wanted to finish up just by asking you both a slightly more, well, maybe not too personal question, but just kind of for you both, what kind of sustains you, what helps you to kind of, as people who are engaging with this on a day-to-day basis, writing about it, talking about it, what helps you to kind of carry on?
Oh, shall I, singing in a choir. Really stupid stuff, actually. I mean, yeah, there are things. I had some XR protesters to stay in my house at the last thing, and they were basically, I hadn't yet gone vegan. I had milk in my fridge, and they were horrified, and it really helped me. I was like, oh yeah, I'm being really stupid. Like, I'm writing about this stuff every day, and there's a really small thing I could do, so I'll just do that. But I also really liked having the protesters to stay. I mean, they were just, yeah, to try and do things that are fun, and if you make the odd sacrifice, like not eating cheese, that's easy. But yeah, and singing.
Yeah, I guess it's trying. I guess for me, it's like trying to find the right balance. So there are, yeah, I guess in terms of commuting and etc., like transport, I do enjoy walking and cycling and all of those activities. I think I've convinced myself to really like vegetables, so that's a win, and I guess then I guess just thinking of things as inspiration rather than work, and I guess thinking about I guess being sort of inspired by the amazing people that are kind of also actively wanting to make the world a better place as well, and feeling like part of a group of people who want to make changes is quite sustaining.
Yeah, totally. And the world's so sort of brilliant, like just being aware of the thing that we're trying to, I don't know, preserve. It's just such an amazing thing, and I suppose that's very sustaining in itself. But
and I think you write about in the book, Anouchka, about kind of connecting to nature as well, and kind of being reminded of what you're trying to preserve, whether it be sort of a bird box. But there's also a kind of not feeling that you have to be perfect before you're allowed to do something, because I think that's the worry, isn't it? That, you know, that can you have XR people to stay if you've got milk in your fridge? Well, I think the answer is yes, because they'd rather, you know, people would rather you do something than wait to be perfect and immaculate before you kind of start engaging with this. So I guess that's a good message as well, that it's okay to, there's always a kind of incongruity between how we aspire to be and how we are, but that doesn't mean we don't get to have an opinion and want to do better. There's some really good suggestions in the chat about also kind of sustainable approaches to quality improvement, things kind of in terms of prescribing, which is a huge one, kind of prescribing smarter for shorter. That's a big one, and comments about kind of making it a part of everything. So thank you very much for those comments. I'm going to just share my screen again because we'll finish up very shortly, and I just wanted to put some links to other places that you may find information if you've been inspired by today. So the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare is running some amazing courses, which were mentioned also earlier. So I'd really encourage you to have a look at them if you're working in health services. Of course, the college position statement is helpful. You know, one thing you can do today is sign the healthy prescription letter, which is going to COP26. So the link for that is there. You can join MedAct, which is another organisation very involved in kind of not just the environment, but also kind of social justice more generally. And of course, the BJPsych Bulletin editorial or collection of papers that we've got. So I'd like to thank Anouchka and Shuo very, very much, and also thank RC Psych Wales again for having us. I'm going to hand back to Delith now before the next session.
Thank you so much. Thank you to BJPsych Journal, to the BJPsych Bulletin, to Cate, Shuo and Anouchka for that really actually motivating session. It's given